Football for a Buck is the book, and Jeff Pearlman joins us on the show this morning. Jeff, good morning.
You know, even though we're speaking via phone, I can smell the Salvation Army thrift store from here.
I can, too. It's very pungent. Very.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Man, it's interesting because I know this was a labor of love for you. You document that in the book, but you've gotten a lot of attention for this book, and not only because of your accolades as a writer, but I think this touches on something. It touches a nerve. Why do you think so many people are so interested in a story about a league from 30 years ago?
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, for guys, you know, we're probably going to say the age bracket-ish. Like, there's a real strong nostalgia for the USFL. You know, forget like you just said, the Michigan Panthers uniforms were just insanely cool. You know, just that aside, like the uniforms, the colors, the names, you know, the Outlaws, the Gunslingers, the Gamblers, and also like the league was just really gutsy and sort of adventurous. And, you know, they signed 3 straight Heisman Trophy winners. They started picking off guys from the NFL left and right. The NFL was legitimately frightened by the USFL and the threat it had. And it was just really exciting football. I mean, you know, the run-and-shoot offense, Jim Kelly and the Houston Gamblers, like that was some really revolutionary stuff going on. And I just think it really touches a lot of things that sports fans love.
I think you're right. And when it comes to the NFL, as you describe in the book, they nicknamed in the NFL circles the USFL the useless, and they would laugh and mock the league. But there had to be a moment where they really were alarmed because of either the money that was being spent, the type of players they were getting, the attendance figures of some of the teams. What was the first time, do you think, the NFL was alarmed at the competition?
Well, I think the first time had to be when Herschel Walker jumped to the USFL. He was a Heisman Trophy winner out of the University of Georgia, and it was really interesting. He was a junior, and he didn't want to go back to Georgia. He was ready to make money. He came from a very poor family in Wrightsville, Georgia. And at the time, the NFL wouldn't take him. They only drafted seniors. And he reached out to the USFL, and the USFL had this whole debate, what do we do? And they finally decided it was worth it. And the funny thing is, as soon as Herschel Walker started negotiating with the New Jersey Generals, the Dallas Cowboys found out about this and had a representative call Walker to see what they had to do to get him. And by then, it was too late. He said, I'm committed to the Generals. So that was really a big blow. And the other one that doesn't get spoken about quite as much, you know, Jim Kelly was drafted by the Bills in 1983, and he had said beforehand, I do not want to go to Buffalo. But he felt trapped. And he was in the Bills. This is a true story. He was in the Bills' offices with his agent negotiating a deal with the Buffalo Bills. And Bruce Allen of the USFL, the Chicago Blitz, found out that Kelly was there, and he called the Bills' offices, pretended he was a relative of the agent, and said, we have a family emergency. Can you put him on the line? Got him on the line and said, I know Jim doesn't want to go to Buffalo. You know Jim doesn't want to go to Buffalo. Walk out of there, and we will make you happy as a league. And they left, and the USFL said, you tell us where you want to go, and we'll make sure you go there. And that's how he ended up going to the USFL. And the NFL was pissed and terrified.
Which is amazing, but Jim Kelly ended up becoming a Bill after the league folded. You tell the story about Steve Young being courted by the LA Express, where the Bengals wanted to draft him number 1 overall in 1984, and he did not want to go to Cincinnati. He never obviously stepped foot in Cincinnati, but imagine Steve Young as a member of the Bengals. But was that one of the breaking points of the USFL when they tried to cobble together what they said was a $40 million contract for Steve Young?
Yeah, it's funny because there was a really misleading, you know, the USFL was trying to build all this hype. So they called it a $42 million deal. And what it really was an annuity, not that different than what Walter Payton signed with the Bears a few years earlier. And the owner of the LA Express was an absolutely insane man, named Bill Oldenburg. And he was just spending money left and right that he didn't have. And he gave Young all this dough to come to LA. And Young was was a really good player, but they couldn't pay the bills. And the crazy thing is, I mean, they have Steve Young as a quarterback. They're playing in the LA Coliseum, which holds 90,000 people. Even with Steve Young, they're drawing about 6 to 7, maybe 8,000 a game. They held a Steve Young poster day. First 10,000 fans get a Steve Young poster. Only 7,000 people showed up. So he was he's a great player, but he wasn't at that point, his name alone did not change a league or change a franchise.
Jeff Pearlman, author of Football for a Buck, The Crazy Rise and Crazier Demise of the USFL. One thing that really piqued my interest in your book is how you noted that Howard Cosell took on the cause of the USFL as a pet project. He really wanted it to succeed. Why did he have a rooting interest in the USFL?
All right, first of all, he was kind of an Al Davis guy, and he hated Pete Rozelle, and he thought the NFL was kind of a thug, and he always rooted for the upstarts. He was just a guy who rooted for the upstarts, and he really sort of took to the league and the idea of the league, and he loved when they got Herschel Walker to sign. But he was also very injurious to the league. He was one of their key witnesses in the trial that ultimately doomed the league, and he showed up drunk, and he actually was on the stand, and he was intoxicated, and it went very, very badly for the USFL.
Man, so. Yeah. You know, you write about how there were some real misses, obviously, the Washington Federals, amongst others, really bad attendance, really bad teams. But then some teams really did well. And the first championship game in Denver was played between a team from Detroit, the Panthers, and a team from Philadelphia, the Stars. And it drew to a neutral site 50,000 people. How did they ever draw 50,000 people to a neutral site game of a first-year league?
Well, they hyped it big. The two teams that made it happened to be two teams that drew really well. So they actually drew a lot of fans from the two cities coming to the game. The other thing was, I mean, you have to remember who those teams were. Michigan Panthers. Bobby Hebert was their quarterback. Anthony Carter was their star wide receiver. They were really, really good. The Philadelphia Stars, Carl Peterson was their general manager. Jim Mora was their head coach. The best story to me in the USFL was Sam Mills, who was cut by the Toronto Argonauts. Then he was cut by the Cleveland Browns. Sam Artigliano, the coach of the Cleveland Browns, calls Carl Peterson with the Stars and says, I got a guy, you're going to look at him and you're not going to want him. He's a 5'9" middle linebacker. And Carl Peterson says, I'm not signing a 5'9" middle linebacker. It's like, trust me. Just watch him in pads. And Sam Mills became, to me, I probably agree, a very borderline Hall of Fame candidate. And he came from Montclair State. He was teaching photo at East Orange High School when the Stars signed him. To me, stories like that really sold the USFL and the narrative of the USFL really well.
The talent of the league is extraordinary. And
Yep.
I think about the XFL that's going to try to reboot or the AAF coming up in the winter. And if they had future Pro Football Hall of Famers, Steve Young, Jim Kelly, Reggie White, if they had these types of guys on their rosters, it'd be impossible not to watch. How extraordinary is really the talent that a rival league had of the NFL at that time?
Well, I'll put it this way. Gil Brandt, when he was with the Cowboys, he was asked at the time how many USFL players could play in the NFL. He's like, maybe a dozen. They ended up with 200 players jumping from the USFL to the NFL.
Yeah.
There was an ungodly all right, I'll put it to you this way. This is the best example. I was watching a video a few weeks ago of Doug Williams playing in the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos when he won the Super Bowl. He threw 4 touchdown passes in that game. One was to Kelvin Bryant. One was to Gary Clark. One was to Ricky Sanders. Doug Williams was an Oklahoma Outlaw. Kelvin Bryant was a Philadelphia Star. Gary Clark was a Jacksonville Bull. Ricky Sanders was a Houston Gambler. That is direct impact of the USFL on a team winning the Super Bowl. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And those are really good players. There was a lot of them around the NFL. You mentioned Sam Mills, Gary Zimmerman. I mean, the list goes on and on. How many really good players came out of the USFL? And I always think about this. Had they not tried to go to the fall season, look, they had problems financially already. They had owners that were overspending. Donald Trump was one of those owners. But if they never challenged the NFL in the fall, do you think it ultimately would have worked?
I think what would have happened is you would have had a merger at some point. The thing that really haunts a lot of the USFL owners, and they didn't know it at the time, was the 87 strike. That if the USFL was around when the NFL had the strike in 87, you could have potentially had a massive influx of guys to saying, forget this, we're going to go to the other league. And I think you have to remember, you had a team in Baltimore in the USFL, you had a team in Tennessee, you had a team in Jacksonville, you had a team in Oakland. There were a viable 4, maybe 5. Birmingham drew amazingly teams that would have been, pretty good fits for the NFL.
And that was only 2 years away. This happened in 85, and then the strike happened in 1987. There's a lot of effects of the USFL on football. They were the precursor of the two-point conversion. Obviously, they kind of broke open the financial structure of the NFL. When you look at the NFL today, run and shoot, you mentioned Mouse Davis. When you look at the NFL today, what do you think the lasting effects are from the USFL?
So I was this morning, I did the NFL Network, and I did Good Morning Football. And Nate Burleson is one of the hosts, the former line receiver.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, your career, you can look at the USFL, because what the USFL did, especially the Houston Gamblers, they brought in Mouse Davis as the offensive coordinator, and he brought in this run-and-shoot offense. And they found all these receivers who were 5'9", 5'8", some 5'10", who were really fast. And they found them from small schools, Ricky Sanders, Gerald McNeil, Clarence Verdun. And they opened it up for them. Richard Johnson. And they had this bing, bing, bing attack. And what you see in the NFL now, a lot of it, especially slot receivers, the Wes Welkers and the Wayne Corbett's, and the small, quick guys. That really did not exist as a role. If you think back to the Steelers of the 70s or the Cowboys, they didn't have guys like that. The USFL created that. And that is a really big impact that goes unspoken about that league.
Jeff Pearlman, Football for a Buck, the crazy rise and crazier demise of the USFL. I wonder also if it changed the NFL's outlook on fun, on celebrations, on allowing guys to have personalities. The USFL really encouraged that. At the time, the NFL was known as the No Fun League. Do you think it opened up the NFL's eyes to marketing in that way?
Oh, I do, very much. Very much. If you look back at the USFL videos, it was preposterous. There were more backflips. There was more, dancing in the end zone. There was more trash talk. The one thing the USFL did that the NFL was not doing at that time is they wanted you to get to know the personality. They wanted you to sit down with Bobby Hebert. You could get an hour with Bobby Hebert before a Michigan game. They opened it up to the idea that players are worth promoting. It's not just about the emblem on the helmet. It's worth talking to these guys. So if you want to talk about the birthplace of guys like Jim Kelly, like Steve Young, becoming household names and developing their personalities, it's right there with the USFL.
Isn't it also hysterical that because the NFL won't license its footage to many places, when you watch commercials for TV companies or Zenith or Best Buy, you still see USFL highlights on the commercial? Isn't that great?
Wait, I got to tell you, it's the best thing ever. So the two guys who did there was a weekly highlight show called This is the USFL, This Week in the USFL, and it was Mike Tolan, who became a very well-known producer, and his partner, Gary Cohen, who's had this really long career too. And toward the end of 85, the USFL could no longer pay them. They just didn't have the money. And one day, one of the guys at the USFL calls Gary Cohen into his office, and he says, we can't pay you, but I'm going to give you something valuable. And he's like, what is it? He's like, I'm going to give you the film vault. And Gary Cohen is like, what am I going to do with this film vault of old USFL games? Nobody wants it. He's told me through the years he made $100,000 every year just off of that.
Wow.
Because if a TV company isn't the official TV of the NFL, they can't use NFL footage. I was watching Friday Night Lights. A couple of years ago, I used to watch Friday Night Lights. And, Julie Taylor's in the student lounge. And there was one I was working on this book, actually, and she's watching the Houston Gamblers play the Tampa Bay Bandits. I'm like, holy cow, that's amazing. So if you look closely, beer commercials, TV shows, SpongeBob, you will see USFL players.
I love it. This book is so cool, man. I so appreciate you writing this book because I am all in on it. Football for a Buck, the crazy rise and crazier demise of the USFL by Jeff Pearlman, New York Times best-selling author. It's available now everywhere that books are sold. I know this was a passion play for you and a labor of love, and, man, you crushed it. So congratulations, buddy, and thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's really an honor. Thank you.